Oh, I guess I misunderstood, Dan. I thought you weren't responding to 2028 and 17. So my agenda is incorrect.
Well, we're prepared to talk about, kind of why we're staying where we're at in terms of in response to your last changes. So I went ahead and sent the last one to you. It's probably redundant. That's just kind of what we spent some of our time talking about prior to this. So
Okay.
I do think we have a change on Article 20, though, maybe that we haven't conveyed.
yeah,
to.
we did make a change there.
Okay.
Yep. What do you want to start with, Hobie?
Well, it looks like it's your show today, so I'll leave that to you guys.
Well,
So
why don't we start with 20 if we've got it ready?
Sure. We're printing it out over here, so if you can give us one more second.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is Kevin going to be able to show that on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then we're ready to go when you have that ready.
Okay. So the one thing that we did make a change here, I think since the last time that you saw it, was to provide that if the
Hey,
funds
Nancy,
are exhausted.
Nancy, can you hold on just a second?
Okay. We're going to get it up on the screen.
Yep.
Just a sec. It's coming. All right. Wait. Okay.
All right. So the change we made in section 5A is underlined there double. You had proposed 14,500 on 624. What we're saying here is that we would start with 12,500 for this coming year. If funds are exhausted then for that year, then the fund would increase to 13,500 the next year, 21-22. And if funds were exhausted, that amount of 13,500 was exhausted in 21-22, then the fund would go to 14,500.
Okay, I understand.
And then the final paragraph we talked about, but we didn't give you in writing before, and that is on the second page. It has to do with the use of these money for the substitute or temporary employees. That we talked about this, and I think Kevin maybe has a little bit of explanation too, but sometimes if a building has exhausted all the funds they have budgeted for substitutes, and somebody comes in with a really good use for some sort of additional training, but it would require their absence from work, the money, would come for the tuition for that training would come out of this fund. But I think what we're proposing here is that it could be agreed to by the assistant superintendent to allow the money to come from this fund in order to make it happen, so that it could pay for the substitute for that day. And that would have to be within the $450 that we've earmarked as being the amount. So it wouldn't be like paying for the substitute would tap monies that otherwise would not be available to that person. They just found something that as a tuition of $200 or $300, and adding another payment there from the fund will allow the person to go, because that would fund the substitute.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so I think that's all of the changes since last time. I think also those are the major differences between us on the proposals. So we have high hopes of being able to TA this one.
I think we're really close. We will need to have a quick caucus to talk about it, but I think we're getting there.
Okay. The next one, I suppose we could put up just some of these are just kind of like one item. Article 28, reclassification. So I think we have not proposed a change here, but we wanted to talk about your proposed change in section 4.
Okay.
So that sentence right there, I believe, is agreed upon by both parties. You wanted an additional sentence saying any work removed from the employee through this process shall still be performed by the bargaining unit, and if not, shall be subject to the grievance procedure. So I think our concern with your proposal is that there are, in my experience, a number of situations where we have a bargaining unit member who starts picking up work that a supervisor is supposed to be doing. And they may be a very capable bargaining unit member with a lot of ambition and willingness to take on new tasks. And sometimes it becomes easy for a supervisor to allow that to happen. And then the bargaining unit person wants to be paid at a higher level, which you can understand why. But it may be that we want the supervisor to do the work and not be farming it out to one of your employees who they supervise. So, we can't agree that that work would be performed by the bargaining unit because it was never bargaining unit work to begin with. So that's the problem we have with your language.
Yeah, and I think we had some good discussion around that last time where basically we want to preserve our work. We're not, looking to absorb your work. And we just want to make sure that work is, if it's taken off that person, since typically if it was taken off, it's most likely higher paid work, that we would like to ensure that a union member, or I should say union bargaining employee, is doing the work and it's not being done by a supervisor or being kind of the reverse of what you're saying. We don't want them supervisors doing our work or something like that in return. And I think one of the things we talked about is that just replacing that sentence I had in there with maybe possibly a sentence that said, the administrative folks will not do our unit work or something like that. And we can put that in caucus. We can add that in there, and maybe that would suffice on both sides of this issue by taking out that other sentence and just making it clear that we want the work to stay with the bargaining unit when it's their work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if the work was performed by the bargaining unit before, and now it's being performed by another bargaining unit member, maybe at a lower pay range, and we say, nah, that's not that person's job. I mean, it was bargaining unit work. It still will be bargaining unit work in that example.
Yeah, that's the concern on our side. So I think we're of one mind on trying to consider the work for the two different groups. Just maybe having a simple sentence to figure that out. And when we caucus, maybe we'll come back with something real quick and to the point that might make that clear, and we don't have to worry about it again.
Okay, so that's fine. We'll wait to hear what you have from that.
When we get onto that one though, so we had some concerns, I think, on our proposal where we had talked about, kind of the process a little bit, the sausage making, if you will, where we want to take it to the labor management meeting first.
Mhm.
But if there's not a labor management meeting, like let's say that in the summer, Dan and Vance don't really have a lot going on, they decide not to have these meetings. We got a person who we added 30-day language so that we could have for sure that they would have a meeting to have the discussion and not have to wait an extended period of time. And then if the labor management meeting settles the issue, so be it. But if it doesn't, then it would go to the committee, is how we had set up in our proposal. And I think a lot of it after that is pretty much the same after that. So that's the very start of this 1 and 2, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Our concern was that, frankly, if the labor management group isn't meeting, then what's the likelihood this committee will be meeting? Because there's probably going to be, among those 3 district representatives, there's probably somebody else. Dan may be on both of those. So I guess the cancellation of a labor management meeting, is it during break periods that this is a problem, that the labor management group wouldn't meet? Or is it just like the emergency comes up and so there's usually that's a postponement of a labor management meeting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the example that Dan gave was a really apt one. He said him and Vance may go back and forth and nobody has anything for the agenda, so they just, work on something else. They got plenty of other things to do, so they don't have the meeting, right? Unless they want to have a staring contest, I guess. So that would be kind of like the example in addition to the summer break, I think, what we'd be talking about here. And that's part of our concern from our proposals is how we address that piece. And also we wanted to make it a little clearer that the labor management is the first step, but it's not the last step, because in the last sentence here, it says 3 of each party may be mutually agreed upon to study the issue. Well, we should have that as our second step. Is our other concern here is that it doesn't have to be 3 people. It can be up to 3 people, right? But so if some people's gone on vacation, we could have 2 on 2 or something like that, with the hopes of having 3 on 3. But sometimes that just may not line up with everything we've got going on both sides. And then that would be our second step, right? And then that process there, we would have that come before that committee after the labor management failed to resolve it. We're looking to have a progression, and then the rest of it speaks to that.
Yeah.
Really.
But let me ask you, who's on labor management from, first of all, the management side? Dan, you're on labor management, right?
So myself, probably Scott Drew will be on that. Kevin's joined those. I kind of bring in different people depending on the subject. Steve's been in on those. Kind of depends on what the agenda items are. I do like having a building principal there. It's kind of rotated a little bit, but it's primarily, this year it's been mostly me, but Scott might be involved this coming year.
Usually a board member as well.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Janet's on that. I'm sorry, Janet.
And what about the union? Who's on that for the union?
Kind of like Dan, we usually have the president there. And then from there, we have other folks kind of rotate in and out as we see kind of who might be more of the person that's dealing with the issue, or the person who has the most experience in talking about it, kind of go from there. Ron tends to go to a lot of them as well. I think Lisa's been to some. It really just depends. The only constant is the president, and then occasionally I show up as a spectator.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just wondering whether there's a lot of crossover between these 2 groups, such that if labor management isn't meeting, that the committee wouldn't be meeting either. I don't know who we would appoint to that committee, because we haven't really had that before.
Yeah, and that's how I've seen it done in the past is you typically have one constant, like Dan was saying, and then you tend to kind of bring people in. If you're talking about a secretarial issue, we would probably want Lisa there. If you're talking about a 10-month employee, we'd probably want Kelly there. If you're talking about custodial, we'd probably want somebody from custodial, and so on, right? It only makes sense to have the people there that speak to the issues. I don't know that I've seen where they have I'm sure they do somewhere, but I haven't seen where they have set committees where the whole team is set on both sides. Just because it limits your flexibility to really have some good discussions about what's going on, has been my experience.
Well,
So-
why don't we, when we go to caucus, we will look at your 624 proposal that you had that additional language in green, and you also had added the referring to this committee as the reclassification committee.
Right.
We'll look at that language and discuss that again, and then you guys can take a look at you can address our concerns in section 4.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. So now moving along, trying to hit these ones that have pretty discrete issues. Emergency school closure, Article 17. So I believe that we have agreement on section 1 between our, your 624 proposal, I think is the same in section 1 as our 615 proposal.
I'd have to look at it side by side, but it does look very similar.
So then we get to section 2, and that's what we want to talk about.
Sure.
Long term, our proposal was that we would meet to bargain over terms and conditions of employment, not dictated by law.
Right.
And your proposal was to spell that out a little bit more and have employees paid for the first 2 weeks of school closure.
Mhm.
And I think that our feeling is that these are going to be individual kind of circumstances. I mean, obviously, we got one of these coming up this fall. And once we get through with the study process and the board makes a decision by August 15th, you know, there's going to undoubtedly be an obligation to bargain unless it's something that is worked out during the study process and pretty well included in the district plan. But it's really so difficult to think about how we would, you know, would we in every case want to pay for the first 2 weeks of school closure? I mean, we have a provision up there for payment for everybody for 1 week, but that's because we can see our way through the idea that we'd probably be rescheduling many of those days. So people who would have received pay but weren't working at all during a 1 week snow closure, for instance, we may be calling those folks back to work on days when they weren't scheduled in April and May, and maybe a couple of days at the end of the school year. But a lot of that doesn't work when you're talking about 2 weeks of closure. So our thought was it's just better to get together and bargain at the time, as opposed to try to presuppose or guess at what all of those different circumstances would be. And even if it's, you know, in some cases, it's not possible to work all of that out before you actually have to be calling people in. I mean, look at that's the way it worked out with our MOU on the distance learning. I mean, it took a while for us to do that. In the meantime, we were implementing what the governor was saying about the kinds of programs we were running and the kinds of services. So again, I think that, you know, we would just like to stay with the one paragraph that we proposed, which I think is very close to your section C.
So yeah, I believe I believe that's the same language. Why we put an A and B in there is because it would be, I mean, really that's language from above. Really, it's with the exception of the 2 weeks added in there. We don't see this as a cost to the district. I mean, it says clearly in what we propose that you'd be able to reschedule any or all of these days, with the exception of the first one, of course, to add to the school year. The idea more is that we have people who can't go 2 weeks, you know, they're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't go 2 weeks without a paycheck. So they're going to try to burn whatever holidays precious few holidays they have, personal holidays they have during this time or stuff of that nature. You know, they just get a few as it is, and being trapped at home and having to not get paid for, let's say I have two personal holidays and I get paid the first day. Well, let's say I'm trapped at home 2 weeks. Well, I get paid for 3 of those 10 days. That's going to make it really hard for me to make it on the other end when I'm paying my rent and my other bills. Whereas knowing that I have those 2 weeks covered with the understanding that I have to work at the end of the year to make up that time, like I would any other closure, quite frankly, the costs would be zeroed out. There would be, you know, the exception to that would be if they decided not to make up those days, but that would be at the board's discretion. So they would have that full information in front of them when they made that decision.
Well, it's not all of the board's discretion, because I don't think we have language with the teachers that allow us to impose two weeks of extra schooling at the end of the year without bargaining.
Nancy, some of it would be like days during the year, you know, that they normally wouldn't work, things of that nature, student days, stuff like where the students aren't present, you know, work days, things of that nature. So it wouldn't have to be 2 weeks necessarily at the end of the year. I just use that as an example. But they would be willing to make up those days with that extra security being in there.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot depends on the circumstances. I mean, if something happens in April, um, I can think of, other circumstances like we have a major earthquake off the coast and a lot of utilities, power, and so forth are disrupted. And so, we really can't hold school for a period of time. I understand that people want the assurance of being paid. Um, and it's just a question of whether we would even, have schools functioning physically. It just really seems to us really hard to determine that in advance and make this kind of guarantee. And, in the absence of any money coming from the state or whatever, I guess you would say that probably 1 week of that would be covered by Section 1. I think I would agree with you on that. That's not but your concern is about the second week. And I think that's, one of those situations where we feel like it's better bargained at the time as opposed to trying to guess bargain it now. I don't know, for instance, whether we have enough days when, in the springtime, particularly when teachers report, the classified employees don't, or if we have work for them to do. I mean, we can talk about that in caucus. I think that it's just a bigger reach for us to make that kind of a guarantee without being able to negotiate at the time. So
Yeah, I think that, if we use this last example of the governor's executive order, she had outlined the parameters by which, schools, thus employees, were going to be held harmless. Basically, schools, your funding won't change if you do this list of things that we're expecting of you. And, that was what enabled us to be able to, guarantee employees, no interruption of their pay, is because we had our guarantees by who funds us. And so I think that, to go out and go beyond a week and say that there's going to be a 2-week commitment, I totally get where you're coming from in terms of for your employees, other than, everybody, us included, are going to be in a situation of uncertainty. And so hopefully, if there is a situation, well, hopefully there's not a situation, but if there is, we would have some idea of what we were dealing with in order to come to the table and make appropriate plans.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, the governor's order, no matter what we bargain here, has the potential to override it anyway. If she comes in emergency, like she did last time, a state of emergency and mandates, we're going to have to live with that anyway. And I understand what you're saying, that, you're trying to, I mean, there's parts of this that's unknown, that's for sure. But the thought process is that paid status that the governor imposed on you, those days are not made up. So there is a real cost for you there if they were to, limit your funding or whatever. This here, where we're offering to make those days up at no additional charge, that's where we see the flexibility being, because during that time we can be bargaining, sitting down, having this discussion, figuring out how it's going to work, and people aren't sitting there waiting to see if they're going to get paid, but they do understand that they're going to have to make up this time at the end of the year if it's required, because that the idea is not to get a couple extra weeks of pay and not have to do anything with it. So the idea is to add flexibility and security for our folks that quite a few of them, unfortunately, are living paycheck to paycheck and need to know that they have that stability. And quite frankly, it helps keep people here, because when one bad snowstorm and they don't get paid for 2-3 weeks, then all of a sudden, we start saying, I can't have that kind of insecurity because I couldn't make my rent bills and stuff. And we have people leaving the district, right, for other opportunities. And that's not what we want either. So we want to keep these good people here. And the paycheck to paycheck problem is something we have to address in other articles as well, but this would be a good start in giving them security during this time. So I think we understand each other's positions, and I don't feel like either side is being, you know, coming at this with malice. I feel like we're trying to figure it out. So maybe having some discussions in caucus about this one would be something that we can both do and have maybe a better coming together after that.
Yeah, I think that it'll help us to have a further discussion. So why don't we return to this article after caucus? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So putting that away, let's take a look at 7. And what we did here was we worked off your 624 proposal. And so that we could highlight where we have some ongoing concerns. And there's some minor changes we're proposing too, but there's a couple of areas where we have some ongoing concerns. So
We don't have a 7 over here. That was included in the article.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure where Kevin was at. He was scrambling to have it readied. So yeah, sorry, we have not sent that to you yet.
It's not ready, so I'm going to put up.
Okay.
I didn't have enough time.
let's see, can we go to
Well, we
job
can put up theirs if we want, and then you can talk about
Oh, yeah,
sections
okay.
of theirs
All right,
if you want.
okay.
Okay, give me a second.
Well, perfect timing for us to introduce our new superintendent who is joining us. So hopefully a lot of you have met Scott. So Scott Drew, first day on the job. And I think
Hi, everyone.
more familiar with Zoom than he is with Google Meet. So he's probably feeling more at home. So thanks, Scott, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so what we've got here is the union's proposal from 624. Okay. So starting up at the top, I think we're fine. I suggested down under number 4, if you go to that, we add this same language for disputes, please see 8B.
Okay.
We've added that to 3, but to add it to number 4 as well.
All right, we can do that.
And then if we move to number 6, again, I think the rest of that, I'm skipping over the things we have agreement on.
Right.
So I think that the concern here under number 6 was about the kind of information requested. We wanted to add after the word information there in that last line of 6. So it would read, the district shall also provide the union information, comma, as required by PECPA when requested by a member of the leadership. And that's just to be sure that we're talking here about stuff that's related. The right to information that you have is pretty broad under PECPA, but there are some things that might not. Student records would be an example.
Right.
And you couldn't get them through a public records request either. And there are reasons why, we wouldn't provide you with that information. So the statement as it stands there in your proposal seemed a little too absolute. So we just inserted as required by PECPA.
Okay.
Then I think going down through 7 until we get to G, just a clarification. It seemed like that what you were talking about in G is new hire of non-union member classified employees. Because the word non-union employees could be interpreted to be teachers and administrators.
No, sorry. This is from the letter that we signed in the last.
Right.
Year. And the
Right.
non-union employees. Stop me if I'm wrong, Dan, but the non-union employees were anybody who's not in the union currently could exercise number 5. Really, that's really what that was about, for people we've missed along the way, stuff like that.
We acknowledge that that's it as this moves into the contract, just trying to provide a, some greater clarity there, new hire of non-union classified employees, I think is just, providing a greater clarity there. It's I knew what you're talking about.
Yeah, because we're talking about the people that come on tomorrow and the people that are currently here, been here 14 years. For some reason they changed their mind and want to talk to us to get the details. Fine.
Yeah, we're not worried about that. We just wanted to make sure that
We've had 0 requests. So, okay, yeah. So
we need to do a better job.
yeah, I'll take you up on that.
So
But
our proposed language there under G at the heading for this section is a non-union member classified employees.
gotcha.
Okay. And Kevin will, we'll have a copy for you, but this goes over just to see what so then down under number 8, we continued to massage this issue about notice, and you had proposed where students are present. I think we had a concern still that there ought to be some sort of a check-in procedure when you're going into any district building. So we are going to be returning to language that says just the front office of any district building. At the same time, that it will differ depending upon where you're going to show up.
Right.
And so if it's a school building, checking in at the front office. I think maybe some of the other folks have examples of other situations, but then Steve was telling us about the fact that there's going to be more security over certain areas that have been not secured, probably needed to be secured. And one of those was the shops area, I guess. So maybe it's gonna be some explanation about that.
Well, I just think that, leaving it, if you and Vance have a practice of, kind of, especially this time of year, there's no one around coming in. I mean, that's, we understand that there's probably not a need to check in there, but I just didn't want that broad a language there where, if we move some things around and, there are kids sometimes out there in sort of in that vicinity with during lunch times and things like that, we just wanted to we didn't want that broad a language of when students are present, and then what if Vance is no longer the president, that could change the location. So anyways, we just would like to keep it that piece out of there and make it standard practice that we always check in.
Yeah, and I don't want us to agree to something and then game the system. I really don't have an issue with letting folks know. I don't think it should generally be a surprise if I'm showing up, unless it is something where I'm literally picking something up and going, which has happened a few times, But I'm trying to. I got to be careful with access. I just have to be careful because. Union reps don't fall under the standard public stuff and everything, I just have to be careful what we agree to. I am really trying to think of a way to put everybody's mind at ease. And this was the first attempt at that. But I am trying to think of a way to do this that isn't overly cumbersome, that future administrations on either side don't play with and, start making you delay 30 minutes at a gate. I've had that happen before, not with you guys, but in other areas, just because they want to, and stuff like that. I'm trying to figure out the way to thread that needle so that we're having a good faith interaction and that neither side's trying to game it. And
that's why we're agreeable to your without delay, and we don't, we certainly would want to be called on it if you felt like we were, throwing up undue obstacles. And I know that middle school campus is a little wonky if you're picking something up and there was, someone watching you to make sure you went to the front of the building to check in, to go and then turn around and come all the way back around. I don't want to be ridiculous here. So, But
I did like your idea about the badge too, because that's worked really well in some areas. But I don't know if it's something that you have up and running anytime soon, but it's been something where people ask who you are, you got a badge, right? And they
Yeah.
can check and
Mhm.
comfortable
Yeah.
with it. So, okay, well, let me look at it some more. Let me figure it out. And then once I get your official proposal, I'll take a deeper dive on that, please.
Okay, and we're gonna be highlighting these areas where we're working off your last proposal so that this is something that is pretty easy to, get through. I still have a problem with number 9 because I think it duplicates everything in other places. I know that the different sections of 2016, House Bill 2016, there's some duplication there too. But so that's why we've still got that highlighted, because it seemed like we covered employee orientations elsewhere. So I guess maybe what we're waiting is to hear from you about why that needs to be there at all. Because we've got previous language for 9.2 about meeting with employees to discuss grievances, complaints, other workplace related matters without compensation. And that includes the designated rep attending that meeting. I think we have other language up above. We kind of have agreed on a standard 1 hour for the presentation to the orientation meeting. So this seemed like an excess of not just additional language that might be kind of confusing. So that's our basic concern as you look at it.
On 9.2, if you can point me to where maybe I've just overlooked it. We've been looking at this thing for so long, maybe it's just kind of blended in the background for me. But if you can show me where it's up in the other part, I'm not interested in replicating, multiple times the same thing. Where it talks about workplace matters. I didn't see that spelled out, but maybe it's broken up in a couple pieces. To be fair, like I said, we've been looking at a lot of different things here, but I'm not totally concerned about that one if we have it elsewhere. My concern was we did not have it elsewhere. On 9.1, this is, how it's been explained to me is this is talking about like orientations, not like new employee orientations, which we have labeled out for 30 minutes and an hour and that kind of stuff like you said. This is like return to, we have a day where all the classified come back and they return before school starts. That orientation, that yearly orientation, some people call it district days in some areas. But that's more of what we're talking about with 9.1. And maybe we could say it much simpler. I mean, do the teachers, when they get their folks back together, do they get like 1 hour to address them at the start of the year kind of thing with what's going on? And maybe we can just make it simpler and say that for 9.1, that they'll have an hour to address, you need to address the membership as a whole and have concerns or whatever brought up, or however we want to say it. But that's what my understanding of 9.1 is. It's not new employees. This is actually employee orientation, new employee. And when I dug into that, my understanding was what I said about it being return to work days, where people come back and they have a day where you go through all the stuff with them.
yeah, we would be agreeable to an hour, and if we wanted to do have a section in there that's an annual orientation day, or whatever term we wanted to call it, that would be fine. I don't know if we want to, so we're not creating a 9 just for one item. I don't know if we want to find another location for that, but we would be amenable for an hour for an annual employee orientation.
Okay, so let me work on that, and I'll wait for your proposal just so that I make sure there's nothing in there of this change. But that's really what we're talking about there. Just, I think I hope it clears it up there. So
do we have something like that for all of the teachers every year? A across the board meeting, not new people, but just for everybody? I mean, some districts do and some districts don't.
Kevin, you want to speak to that?
Every year, yeah, we do that during the in-service week.
Mhm.
And I did find where, it is mentioned up here under G,
oh, thank you, Kevin.
under 7G, hire non-union. Let's see, I think if we go down to 3, that might that might kind of cover it. Of course, new hire, non-union,
Yeah, that's a different thing.
is the new hire, but it's, yeah, it kind of gets at it, but.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
similar, yeah.
Every year, at our in-service week thing, the license, after we have like the big district, function in the auditorium, we typically will split out. Classified will go to one part, a gym, or stay there in the auditorium. Licensed will go to the other place, and then they have their first of the year orientation meeting. An hour is pretty standard. So I think we've got some good language in the license contract that we could probably bring right over.
Okay, well, yeah, we're still waiting for your proposal on that, so if you wanted to do that, we'd be willing to look at it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think probably what we could do is move whatever portion of 9 needs to be kept over into this section. And that new hire is kind of deceptive.
Yeah, well, we broke that out specifically because we wanted to wait until bargaining for the rest of the stuff. And so we split it out for the immediate need, which is the new hire and the non-union employees. That's why it's titled that. But we could find a home for this, I'm pretty sure, once we see the language.
Okay.
Or we could leave it at 9.1, I suppose, too, and just change the language. Depends what you-
So it sounds to me like we have agreement that for across the board, there would be an hour if the district has an orientation. Now, maybe that won't happen this fall because of the way we start, who knows? But if we have an orientation period and we're splitting licensed and classified, that classified would have up to an hour of that time, classified union would. Then we have the separate beast, which is the new employees and what we do with them.
Right.
And then is this part about meeting with people 30 minutes for those who are not signed up to be union members? Is that a third different thing?
It's under the title. That's the non-union employee part. That's the part where the folks, been here, let's say they've been here 5 years, and then all of a sudden they're saying, you know what, I really do want to figure out stuff about the union. Let me go tap people on the shoulder and ask. That's when that would apply. It would be the same sort of thing. We try to schedule it during lunches or before after school, so it's not disruptive to the process of their normal workday, like we would with any new employee. But they could only do it once a year, and we've had zero interest. We have put it out there. We've had zero interest so far. But we thought, just because a lot of people were missed early on, just happens when you switch around leadership and stuff. And that was a way to try to address that so people would have the opportunity if they so chose, but none have chose so far.
So do you hold those together? In other words, new employees and others who might be interested?
No, only because it would be problematic, I think, scheduling that. The 30-minute one is really about just one-on-one. The 1 hour is like you guys hire 4 people all in the same day, and now we have 4 people. Probably don't need a half hour for each of them, potentially maybe, but if you have a group setting where they're together and we can ask questions and they can ask questions, we can usually do that in an hour, I've found, or less. And so that's where we came up with that hour language, is if you have group orientations for new people that are hired on. But we don't tend to intermingle them because it's kind of a nightmare to get, if you have 3 different schools and 3 different people, it's kind of a nightmare to try to figure out how to get them all together,
Yeah, I think that's our major concern, is that we have clear delineation between, which of these, if there is a separate thing, a separate category of meetings, then it's better to put it all in one place so that it's clear that there's this, but then there's this, and
Gotcha.
you have all of the situations accounted for, because they're different in terms of amount of time and so forth. So
Gotcha.
well, we can talk a little bit more about that. And so let's go on to the next one. Under 9.3, so we've talked about 8. 9.3, we added that language in red. You know, we had some discussion about that, the right to use district facilities, and your proposed language is just pretty black and white. A union shall have the right to use the district facilities to conduct union meetings with notification to the district. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't want that to happen if there were other things that had already been scheduled in that building for the use of the particular room.
Mhm.
And so we're saying, you know, if we're talking, I think our language here says subject to the same scheduling procedures. If that means that you check in the front office and that's what other groups do, and you say, what about next Thursday? Would we be able to use the lunchroom or the commons or whatever to have a meeting of classified staff in this building? That's probably good enough. If you're scheduling something out there further that's going to involve the use of a gymnasium, for instance, or, you know, a bigger space, you know, we probably need to have more notice of that. But I think that you just making it simple that the same scheduling procedures as somebody else, some other group would be obliged to follow in order to get that facility reserved.
Yeah, I think that like I've run into this in a few places too, and I think we don't have an issue following the same rules as everybody else when it comes to, like, you put the tables back where they were, you pick up after yourself, things like that. But since it is a union function, it is not the same as other groups. It is just different under PECPA and everything else. So we're trying to figure out. We don't. I know I've said this a few times. We don't want to come in and, like, kick you out of a room. That's not the idea. I don't think that would be appropriate on any level. We come to you with prior notification, say these are the rooms we want, and oh well, and we've had it happen. Oh, the teachers have that room. Oh, okay, so we've moved it to another room. Or oh, hey, you know, we have another meeting scheduled here, so we've had to move it. That's already occurred under our current system with scheduling. So we're happy to schedule it, make sure there's not conflicts. That's not the issue. Don't have a problem with you know, following things like cleaning up after yourself, putting the tables away, you know, if you take them out, that kind of stuff. It gets a little dicey around the idea that we should be treated the same as other groups in the other aspects, because we do have a little more of a legal right to make those requests, I would say.
I think Kevin has a point to be made here.
Sure, go ahead.
I do. Yeah, I do. I just wanted to kind of interject. I mean, it subject to the same scheduling procedures as other groups. I think it's really a very simple thing. We have that the FMX maintenance and scheduling calendar, and anytime we want to use a facility, even an internal one, like if I'm having a trap shooting team meeting at the high school, you know, it's a high school thing. I have to go on to FMX, and it's not a burden at all, and just put in, hey, I need the library for a meeting on this night, and then it gets approved. And that's what we're talking about. Subject to the same scheduling procedures, super easy and quick, and that's the same for everybody. So whether it's an outside group or an inside group, we're asked to use that system.
And we typically go through Lisa, so let me ask her, how do you do
That's
it?
the exact same procedures. I asked that from everybody.
Okay,
In district and out of district.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa gave me some grace when I first got there, but she reminded me that even when I wanted to schedule bargaining with the teachers, I had to go through her. So that's all we're getting at, is that so that there's not mistakes or double bookings, you know, that we are routing things through those channels. That's all we're asking for there, is just to
My
make
life
sure.
a lot easier.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll take a look at that in caucus and see if we can figure out something there.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if we turn to release time, 9.6.
All right.
Okay. So, you know, originally I had said we didn't need to cover this because it's in the statute. You wanted to cover it. Then
All right.
I think you agreed to cross off some things. And I think that we can go with what you're proposing, except I think we have some problems with the timelines mostly and the idea of release. So this part of the law, I think refers to situations where you're going to pull somebody from the bargaining unit and have them work on some sort of a project. You know, you said to attend labor related conferences, training and events, but it could be up to 3 months. Examples that I've seen in the past is when we had a ballot measure, you know, that was on in the fall, and sometimes each union wanted to pull somebody. Generally, it was like so many people statewide. But if one of our employees is being asked to devote, let's say, September and October as an OSEA paid employee to work on a ballot measure, you know, we need more notice on that. So that we put down 30 calendar days as opposed to you had said 3. Now, I mean, you may be thinking about some things that are shorter term, but, you know, I think we're all very aware that sometimes we don't have substitutes we can put in. Sometimes we don't have other people who have the same skills, same licenses and so forth. So, you know, having just 3 days just didn't seem to be feasible for us. And then the question about reimbursement, you know, we feel like we should be reimbursed for the wages and fixed payroll costs of the employee, because we lose productivity, we lose the ability to handle some things. It's, you know, it's not necessarily true that we can replace everybody with somebody who can come in and do the exact same work. So I think that the district's opinion is that we need to have the reimbursement be for the wages and fixed payroll costs of the employee who's on release time. And then if we scroll down, you know, I think a lot of the rest of this is covered under the statute.
Right.
And then only other things we looked at here in these last couple of paragraphs. So any member taking release time to work full-time for OSEA shall have the benefits under 9.65. But under 9.65, we've deleted it up above. So
Right.
I think we have to say, you know, shall have benefits. I think what you want is that person to continue to have like insurance benefits. And, you know, we're fine doing that as long as it complies with, I mean, these are short term. I don't see any reason why OEB wouldn't allow you to continue, but the union would be paying the district, reimbursing the district for those. But it's the fact that under 9.65 doesn't exist anymore. So we have to tie it to something else. You know, have the benefits under the collective bargaining agreement or something like that. Or insurance benefits might be singled out. And then, you know, the 30 days notice prior to using the leave and 30 days prior notice when returning. That works for us because sometimes if we employ a temporary, we want to be able to give that person notice.
Right.
So that's, and then, but D, we don't believe belongs in the contract. That's not a matter of union activity or union rights. If any one of your individual employees wants to run for office, you know, there's standalone statutory language on that.
Okay.
So we didn't see a point in putting it in here. It's not necessarily true that you're going to want to support everybody who wants to run for office. So there might be somebody who thinks they make a great state representative and you wouldn't be interested in paying for them to be gone for campaigning or for serving. So, you know, the language I think is too broad, but I think the best solution here is just to delete that.
Okay, understood.
And then finally, maintenance of standards. You know, we don't subscribe to a maintenance of standards language. We subscribe to the idea that there's specific provisions that the district and union agree on, that the district will comply with, will provide, and those need to be spelled out in the contract. In addition to that, of course, there's an obligation to bargain if we're going to change something that's not spelled out in the contract. If you demand to bargain when there's going to be a change in a mandatory subject or an impact of a change in a permissive subject. So we think that's covered. Maintenance of standards clause is, I think I told you last time, I only know of the one in Portland teacher's contract, and it's created many nightmares over the years because it's so inflexible and it doesn't adjust to current conditions often. But we don't know of other classified contracts that have true maintenance of standards clauses. And we just believe that these things have to be bargained individually as they come along. In many ways, the statute provides for the right to bargain things as they come along. So that takes care of what I think a maintenance of standards clause was originally introduced in some labor contracts.
Okay, so your proposal would be to strike that and keep 10.2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and we keep 10.2, we agree it's kind of surplusage, because anytime we have something in a contract, we're not able to bargain individually with your members. We have to bargain with you, even if we were going to propose something that was going to only cover one employee. So we can agree to that language.
Okay. Well, thank you for going through that. It'll give us something to talk about here in our caucus.
And we'll get you a updated version with the appropriate strikeouts. We will be working from yours, since this one has been, it's so many pages and whatnot. We're going to work from your template, but we'll do the crossouts, and you'll see a little bit more in red there where we've added some language. So we'll get that to you as soon as possible.
All right, that sounds good. And where are we at with 11 and 12? Are these no changes, just want to have discussion? Or?
Nancy, are we ready to do 11 and 12 now?
I think we're ready to do 12. I'm not sure about 11 having something, that we've had a chance to look at. I would suggest we do 12 and then take a caucus.
Okay.
And
okay.
Association can work on those, and we can have another run through on 11 and also the other questions that have come up.
Okay.
Works. So on 12, we're looking at the union's proposal of 624, but we also had a proposal on 624. So just pointing out the differences in those, I think we have a lot of commonality here, but the main one is the proposal in 3: for every 2 internal employees hired, 1 outside employee can be hired that meets the minimum qualifications. We are not willing to give up the right to hire the candidate, whether inside or outside, that we believe is the best for the job. And I do not believe that such language exists in other OSEA contracts. We've agreed to some proposals that relate to some additional opportunities for people to get their name, in the ring, to be considered, and to get more feedback if they're not chosen. So if you look at the part of 3 here, at the end of it, we're talking about, and I believe, have agreed to this at a previous meeting, after receipt of this letter, which you get if you are not selected, upon request, you can have the reasons spelled out. And we've agreed to add this provision for, after the receipt of the letter, the employee may request a meeting with the association, with the assistant superintendent, for a consultation about steps they might take to become more competitive for future vacancies. We gave you some statistical information with actual initials on it last time. And, I find that there were some instances where people who had not been selected in one process were selected in the next. There are instances where people weren't selected because another in-district employee was selected. But we propose this so that people have an opportunity to know what they need to do to be more competitive for future vacancies. So, you know, again, that's a place where that whole paragraph 3, I think, is the most significant difference here.
Right.
Then if you go down to 5, this talks about transfers or reassignments. And those terms to me mean that we're not promoting, we're simply changing a location. It could be a type of service, but I believe that Dana, who can't be with us here today, but I think that she's the one who, you know, has most of these instances, because our assignments for special ed classrooms, it's really a district-wide determination, and she's the one who runs that. So if students move around, or we get more students with severe disabilities in one building, and that happens a lot, there's a lot of changeover. So the question here is, you know, if we have transfer, where it says transfer means assignment to a different district site in the same or different district job title within the same classification pay range. So there's no pay difference here. So what should be the procedure? And so what we have proposed after listening to you here is that the decision to transfer or reassign an employee would involve a face-to-face communication between the employer and the supervisor, so that you get that. And then we would allow a building union representative to attend that meeting. Your proposal, though, then went further and said that a designated representative of the union could be there. And that would mean you, Hobie, or Vance. But at that point, now it's outside the building, outside the area of operation. So we would probably feel that, well, maybe Dan needs to be there. And it just seemed to be way too much process for what, you know, does not have any pay implications, doesn't have any real, you know, change in the major duties. It's a change in location, or with like special education assistance types of rooms. And we really want to keep that informal, but still provide information about why it's happening. So we agreed to that language, but we don't want to create even more formal procedures. So that's our difference in 5. And the final one is what happens if you are promoted, and it's on number 8. You're hired into a different job classification now, and most of those are promotions. I think the only exception would be if you wanted to go from one type of work to another, you know, so that you would be going different classifications. So you're going from food service into instructional assistant, for instance. And we had a discussion about that, what the words a probationary period of 90 days, that's the current language. I believe, though, that your proposal envisioned this 45 days, and we're willing to agree that a 45-day period, we've selected you, you're a current employee, we must have liked your work, liked your potential. So the idea that you would get the full 45 days in the new classification to show that you could do it. But if you don't, then the decision to extend another 45 days is our decision. And of course, the consequence here is not that the employee loses a job. The consequences is they would go back to the position they were in before they got this promotion or they got this change. So it's kind of a compromise. I think that we originally, I think you heard from us that we believe that we could move people back at any time. We're willing to give them 45 days, you know, as a guarantee in that new position. And those are calendar days. But beyond that, the decision to extend or to put them back in their old position would be up to us. And so I think that's how we have come up with how to resolve this particular issue.
Understood. Okay, that'll give us something to look at in caucus. Thank you.
Okay, so with all of that, most of this is yours to, we want to take a look at 11 and make sure that we're all together on that. We'll be ready after caucus on that. So, but most of this is going to be time consuming for you and your team. So how much time do you want?
Well, why don't we check in an hour and see where we're at? We can text Dan and if we need more time. If we're ready to go at 4:15, then we're ready to go. If not, we can let you know roughly how much more time we need. If that works for y'all.
Sounds fine. Yep.
And you're going to come back with 7 too, correct?
Right.
7.
We'll
about
send
some
it
of
over
those
to you electronically
Okay, perfect.
as soon as it's ready.
All right, that sounds good. We'll see you next.
So for our team, all right. So how do you want to send some stuff our way? How do you want to proceed?
We thought we'd send back 20 since I feel like we're pretty close on that.
Okay.
And then Ty's going to respond to that. And then we figured we would, you were working on the top part of 28 and maybe we could do that one next. You guys could present what you came up with that and then we can tell you what we got in the bottom part.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, 20 cents.
And you know, the color scheme, right? Yellow. First,
Yeah, yellow and red.
blue and green.
Ty, did you send that?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. All right, sending it over to my team, our team.
Change up here.
It's from our original proposal. It's the IRS.
Oh, okay.
Just our original proposal,
That's what I thought.
which brings it in compliance with the
All righty, so just a quick reminder of the color schemes. Yellow is from our original proposal, blue is agreed upon, right? And green is
new.
new. So the top part is just keep us compliant with the rest of the contract, but we agreed to section 5. Most of it, we made one change on section 5C, assistant superintendent and union president. Just want to add just a wee bit more transparency to the entire process.
One more down. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't come out clear.
So that's all your language pretty much that you came back with this last time with the addition of the couple little green spots, the union president. I think it says fund above in the title. And then we still have the original stuff from the beginning that obviously we feel brings it in compliance with the rest of the contract, the IRS rates, where it says that in Article 25, I think it is in the contract already. So it just clears that up.
Okay, so the changes to have the union president also be in agreement if there was going to be costs for substitutes or temporaries paid from this fund.
Yeah, we talked
So
about.
just so we like, let me give you an example. Let's say workshop costs $350. Kevin would like $100 of that, the remaining funds to be used to have a sub in his building. And so Vance and I would need to agree on that.
Yeah, and when we talked about it here, the idea was this, like, there's a couple examples about where they don't replace me when I'm gone. So where would that $100 go, right?
Oh.
So obviously we're not talking about that. We're also like, where we have situations where the work is, other people are doing the work or whatnot, it feels better to have a little more transparency and have a case by case kind of situation so that we don't look at this at the end of the year and like, half of this money is going to subs and the other half, that's not the intent of this. The intent is to help defray the costs to a degree, but not to that degree. So this would give it a little extra transparency and would allow you guys to sit down and have this discussion, because these trainings don't pop up overnight. So anything where there's any kind of issue like that, we could have that discussion, or you and the president would have the discussion. And I don't think it'll be a regular occurrence because it says they won't be paid out of this fund unless it's agreed to by the assistant superintendent and the president, right? So that presumption is that most of this will not come to you. It'll probably be more of a case by case kind of situation. And that's the idea here.
All right. I don't have any,
Go back to section A, about those rates.
Oh, up there, yeah.
So we're just trying to make this more consistent for the business office to handle. And so, I guess our thought was that given the fact that the board approves these rates for mileage and also for the meals and everything else, I guess. And then that there are procedures and forms that are used by everybody else to get reimbursed. We just wanted to make it, so that we don't have people handing in little slips of paper saying, hey, I had dinner on the way home from such and such training, and so I need a reimbursement for such and such. We need to have a kind of a standardized procedure, because this happens for all of our employee groups. And so I guess we didn't really understand why that was a problem for you to maintain the existing language.
So, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's having one way to do something makes it easier and uniform. And I don't think we're talking about that from our side of the table here. We're talking about the mileage rates would be what the IRS talks about here. I mean, in Article 25 of the contract, you have that same language. It says the current mileage rate specified by Internal Revenue Service. So this would bring this language here is in conflict with that. Now we're doing it two different ways. This would bring it into line with what you already have in Article 25 in the contract. And that's the intention, like the forms you have them fill out and things of that nature. We're not talking about that here. That's your administrative process. Every time I fill one of these out, they hand me a form and say, this is how we want it done, right? You put it in these boxes and attach your receipts, right? To this day, that's how I do it. So we're not telling you that you have to do it one way or another with the form. Whatever form or internal process you have for collecting that information, that would be something you guys deal with. We're just saying that we don't want it. We want it to be consistent with the rest of the contract. This is the current IRS rates, like it does in Article 25. So that's our idea there. On B, our idea is that if people are going to be requesting this money, they need to put it in writing so that we have, if we get to a point where we don't have enough money, we need to have a priority when people put that stuff in. If I put mine in March 1st, you put yours in March 2nd, well, if we run out on March 1st, I'm fine, but March 2nd, we'd have to have that discussion per the language, right? So that's the intent between those two things, is to make it simpler and uniform with the contract. We're not trying to tell you how to develop your forms or turn in slips of paper. That's not what this is about.
Okay, so I guess, are you saying that, let's take B, if there is a request for reimbursement process in district policy, your folks still are going to follow that? I guess I'm wanting confirmation of that.
Yeah, I think that's what it says in the current contract language too, right? Is that our new proposed contract language through an application process. The professional development must be pre-approved through an application process. So again, I feel like that's just being clear, right? Because the application process is in writing. So we're just being clear about what we're doing down below in 5. Now, how that process looks, that would be, if you're talking about like the board wants to make the form look a certain way or something like that, we're not really talking about, we're not getting into the weeds that far. We're just trying to make it clear that it should be in writing so there's no dispute later if we have issues of funding or whatever may come with that, that we can see who put the request and when they did it. And it makes it easier for you guys to track that information for the report at the end of the year too.
Okay, so you're saying that Article 25, it's already current IRS rates, so,
Right. Yeah, it says I have it right here. It says reimbursed to the current mileage rate specified by the Internal Revenue Service.
okay. All right, so I think that probably takes care of our objection or concern in A, 1A. And it sounds like you're agreeing that we still have the ability to have forms and
Yeah.
processes and so forth in 1B.
Yeah, we just wanted to make it clear that it should be in writing so that any disputes that arise or any protracted information, we have it in writing so we don't have to go back and figure it out.
Okay. Okay, we can take that under advisement and the rest of that in 20. Anybody have any questions about that? The process, the variation in the process. Dan, you're the one that's most involved.
Yeah, yeah, I think that'll be okay.
All right. You guys feel on our team that we need to go back and caucus about 1A or section A up at the top about changing and using the language that they propose because we're already bound by using the current IRS rates in another article of the contract.
Yeah, no, Nancy, I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I think last session, I just rechecked the policy, and I think that's what that says as well, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like we have a TA on this article.
Yep, I think so. I'm agreeable to their adding the union president to that down below. I'm fine with that.
All right, well, we started off in a good spot.
All right.
All right, let me,
You're gonna pull up 28, Dan?
yep, I'm sending that now. It's dated the 15th, but should be the July. Let me see here.
Yeah, it's dated on the document itself, 7/1, but I just didn't change when I saved it, so I will do that.
Okay.
Hold on just a second, I'll get it. I'm just retitling it here. Just hold on.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm including the rest of our team on this one email. So there it went. All right. So I think I'll try to walk us through this, Nancy, but you can, we actually made a few more changes because we thought that might provide a little more clarity to it. So we said 45 days. The proposed change will be brought to the next labor management meeting within 45 days. So we identified that we need to be responsive to the request. We changed some of the language around what this committee reference is. We want labor management to be the decider of this. And so, but labor management may decide, and I think you guys brought it up when we last talked about this, the labor management team might not be necessarily the most knowledgeable about the issue. So the labor management team could have a committee comprised up of other people to study the issue. But then the decision or the recommendation is still as it goes on there in 3, the recommendation of the labor management team. And so we kind of struck out that committee. That committee is, kind of advisory in nature to the labor management team, and the labor management team will make the recommendation to the superintendent. And then we also added some language in there that some retroactive language to the date of the employee's request. So didn't want that employee hanging out there for, up to 55 days potentially. If the recommendation was made that reclassification was in order. So we added that. And then we added that the only grieved portion of this would be if the superintendent's denial of the labor management team a grievance could be enacted if the superintendent denied the recommendation of the labor management team. Did I capture that there, Nancy?
Yeah, I think so. It's basically a 2-step process, and the committee is adjunct to the labor management in terms of coming up with data, studying it, trying to determine, how much of the duties that we know there was overlap typically between, like maintenance 2 and maintenance 1, or secretary 2 and secretary 1. But there are some distinctive duties that are the reason why that 2 position is being paid higher. So we wanted to have a committee to study that, maybe require certain data collection, determine, how much of the time is spent performing these higher level duties, how critical is it that the person do those duties or be actually performing in them. But all of that information goes back to the labor management team then.
We just didn't really want to create we know that you had created a reclassification committee, and I think we just didn't want there to be confusion around whose responsibility it was, and we didn't really want another committee. But we understood that there may be some study that needs to be done, and not necessarily by the labor management team, but like I said, that's an advisory group to study and report back, and labor management would make the recommendation, the decision.
So what happens in here if the 2 sides of the labor management committee team do not agree?
In that case, I think there would be 2 reports that would go to the superintendent.
Okay. Because I see that, I mean, I think there's some good compromises here, and there's some excellent points that you're making, but I feel like that piece would have to be laid out a little bit, just because then it's very clear that, we've tried, we went through the steps, we can't get there, and we need that person to weigh in. So I think that we're real close on that. I would like to see that piece though in here, so that I think we just said it's fine, Nancy, 2 reports would go. I think that's totally reasonable. And the superintendent would have to make the decision. I think that's reasonable, and the rest of the process looks reasonable. I just would like that piece addressed from what you're saying, but everything else looks like something we can work with here on our side.
Tell me again, Hobie, the part that you would like to see addressed.
If there's a dispute within the labor management team, if we don't have an agreement in the labor management team, and I think what you said about putting 2 reports forward essentially, and let the superintendent decide, I think that's reasonable. It doesn't say that in here, so.
Okay.
But
I think we can agree to that where it says that superintendent will either approve or deny, back up their recommendation of the labor management team be issued in writing to the superintendent within 10 working days of the above referenced meeting. We could insert something there that would say that, if there is no agreement, that, there can be, actually, I guess there could be multiple reports, but there can be.
both sides could submit. Both sides could submit.
Both sides could submit to.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have to get it right this exact second, but yeah, that would make me feel better because then we would have that contingency covered in case we don't agree on something. The superintendent, he would have to deal with it. Sorry, Scott. So, but yeah, okay, that would make me feel better. And then if you're done with that, Ron's gonna present ours. I hope you got your typing fingers ready. It's a huge, long proposal. You ready, Ron? Number 4.
Okay,
You want to add at the end of number 4, employer shall not do bargaining unit work.
Maybe it wasn't that long.
So were you guys going to send that over to us, or do you want Kevin to maybe type that into so we can look at it? Or
I figured we just have to tell you can type it in. It felt pretty, I mean, it's 5 words or whatever. I felt like we could.
Into which?
so after number 4, if you want to maybe put our last one up there, our 28,
Okay.
our 28, and then as soon as he gets that up there, Ron, maybe repeat that again because I didn't quite catch it.
A little louder.
Sorry, I thought we were moving on.
Well, yeah. Well, when Hobie set it up, like there's a monstrous thing coming our way. I kind of got, I was gearing up. So after number 4, maybe, yeah. What do you say there, Ron?
Employer,
Duh.
the employer shall not do bargaining unit work. That's it.
Yeah, I might have oversold it a little.
okay, by employer, you mean
I did.
management employees?
Yes, that's right. You're right. I should put we should put the management employees. You're probably right. That's clear.
You know, we talked about this some more, and one of the examples that we were talking about was the fact that, you know, you have principals who go out in the playground. They may end up taking 1 or more recesses. Sometimes you don't have enough instructional assistants to stretch around. Sometimes you want to have instructional assistants be, you know, working during recess with some kids who are having some problems. So you have situations where the management does end up doing what might otherwise be called bargaining unit work. So our concern would be that, you know, that's entirely prohibited. And very truthfully, the situation that occurs when a district's involved in cutting, oftentimes is that you cut in staff and supervisory employees end up having to do some things that maybe they haven't done for a while, or maybe they don't do regularly, but like bus, you know, duty out at the bus loading area. That's very common. So I guess that we're adverse to any kind of language that says that that can't happen, because we know it needs to happen in some instances.
Well, generally speaking, I think that we don't want that to happen, obviously, as much as possible. I mean, I think when circumstances arise, a simple discussion between, you know, the union rep or whoever it is, or the union president, and what saying, hey, this is the situation, what's going on here. I think that goes a long ways to addressing a lot of the concerns you're talking about. But if we're laying people off and we're having management employees doing their work, regardless of whether this language goes in there or not, I think we would have a huge problem with that, because that would create a situation where it would be advantageous to lay people off to save money, to have the supervisor do their bargaining unit work. But we hadn't really thought of it that deeply. It was more just the examples we gave you of, okay, we're doing this work, and now, because we don't want to hire that 4th person, you know, or that half a person, we're going to have the supervisor do that work, you know, that we took off during this process. That's more of what we were talking about. But yeah, I guess that is a concern for us too. The way you kind of couched it, that would be a concern for us. If people are getting laid off and supervisors are doing their work, that would be something we would take issue with.
You know, I know it does happen, and it's not something that would be new. It's something that is part of an established past practice, if you will. Let's go back to your original language, though.
Sure.
you had proposed any work removed from the employee through this process will be still performed by the bargaining unit. So we're talking about work that was bargaining unit work and the employee was doing it. So let's say it was a level 2 person and you had a level 1 person who was real anxious to learn more and get promoted and all this kind of stuff and started doing a bunch of that work, and the level 2 person thought that was just fine. So if we say that we are not going to move that new person to level 2, you're saying that the work that new person was picking up, if it was bargaining unit work, it needs to stay with the bargaining unit.
Yeah, and your example would go back to the 2 that wasn't doing it or was sharing it or whatever they were doing. You would have the ability to either pay that person at the higher rate under this process, or you would say, hey,
Right.
that work properly belongs to this other employee here. And then you would make sure that they get the work back. That's how we see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The work was bargaining unit work. It
Right.
was a question of which bargaining unit employee was going to do it, the higher paid one or the lower paid one.
Correct.
And that's your issue here. Okay.
Yes. Yes, with the reclass, that is it. Yep.
Okay. Mhm. So
Feels like we're
how
close.
about if we took your original language and said, any work, any bargaining unit work removed from the employee through this process shall still be performed by the bargaining unit.
I think we could live with that.
Okay.
mean,
I think that satisfies our concern about, you know,
Sure, yeah, and I would want to see it in writing, but that sounds right to me. That sounds like something we could live with.
okay, so any bargaining unit work removed from the employee through this process shall still be performed by bargaining unit members.
That sounds right to me.
Okay. All right. And then we have this language, the green language up above. We need to fill that out. If there is no agreement, each side may present a recommendation to the superintendent.
That sounds right to me.
Okay. Or do you want to say each party? It might be each side, because you could have people on this committee who cross lines, and you know there might be 3 people consisting of 2 appointed by the union and 1 appointed by the management, and you could end up with a 3-3 split that way. So I guess that's okay. If there is no agreement, each side may make a recommendation to the superintendent. Okay.
Yeah, each side of the issue is how I would read that.
Yeah. Okay. Each side of the issue. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Finish the last sentence in number 4 for me again. I'm sorry.
All right.
Any bargaining unit work removed from an
Work.
employee through this process
Shall still be performed by bargaining unit members.
Feels like we have a TA.
I think we do too. I do want to see it like in my hand so I can read it just real quick. My brain processes a little better that way. So, but it looks like a TA to me too at this point.
Okay. All right, good. And what do we move on to next?
Well, we can go next. It's very short. We don't have a proposal. 17, we feel kind of stuck on that one. Because again, without going over to ad nauseam again, we feel like the upper language as we proposed it is a mirror of yours for the short-term portion, but the long-term, we just can't see, since they're potential, I mean, maybe in a rare, weird circumstance, it would be a cost to the employer, but realistically, if they can make up the days, we just don't see a reason not to agree to give that to people and have them be responsible for making up those days. So I think we're kind of stuck on the second part of 17.
So, you know, one of the problems that I see about this 2 weeks as opposed to 1, and we already have an agreement on 1 that we pay and then we can reschedule, is that a lot of times you know, these things come up as the year goes on. And then as a practical matter, there's not the opportunity to do that. So recognizing though that some people will move on and won't be back the next year. I mean, I guess there's a question about whether there is any opportunity to make up that work in a subsequent year.
Right. Well, and it feels like it's something we could figure out, you know, as far as if it came down to it, how to make up those 2 weeks if the board elected to do that. But our biggest concern remains, and we've addressed it somewhat in one with talking about bringing back the language, or anybody who's used leave during the time of the closure would get it back. That's helpful. That helps address part of what we're talking about. Because really, if I'm a person who's living paycheck to paycheck, you know, like unfortunately, a lot of our people are, that 2 weeks could mean the difference between my rent or my food or, you know, my kids, you know, doctor bill or whatever. And we're trying to figure out, we don't want you to give us a handout. We just want to be able to figure out how to bridge that gap. Because even with a couple personal days, you really can't bridge that kind of a gap. And with the first day being paid on the closure, we're still talking about potentially like 7 days, you know, of not being paid. And that is a big hit to somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck. And we're just trying to figure out how we can do it equitably so where it doesn't cost you money because you can make up the days, and probably would have to with something like that kind of a closure. But also, you know, so save you money, but also give us some security for our folks during that time. And that's why we keep coming back to that, making up the time, because it seems like the most reasonable solution given what we're doing. And the reality is that we can sit down and bargain something, you know, case by case. If something pops up saying, well, hey, we really only need 7 days, not 10 days paid, we could have that discussion based on the facts on the ground, since we can't see the future, like you said. And we could have these discussions where these people back to work and we figure this out, or we give them some assignments to do from home, or whatever the circumstances. We could bargain those aspects. But this would keep people in paid status for the 2 weeks while we're figuring it out, with the understanding that they have to make it up in some fashion. So we're kind of stuck on that, Nancy. I'm not going to lie to you. We went round and round with this, and we're pretty stuck on that piece, trying to figure out another solution.
So let me throw something out there, and I could be showing some of my ignorance here, but are most people on an equal pay throughout each month?
Correct.
In terms of how their salaries are set, or their paychecks are set up?
I believe so, yes. Well, Vance, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that the issue of I get the paycheck to paycheck idea, and I would not want to put anybody in that kind of jeopardy, but I think that any hit, if you will, the people's paycheck would be, you know, towards the end of the year, if there were some adjustments or something that didn't work out. I would think that we would have plenty of time to get to the table to figure out what we would have to do to, you know, provide work opportunities for someone for time that wasn't made up, or something like that. I don't think that next paycheck is going to take a hit because it's spread out. I think there'd be plenty of time to solve a problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. At what point would unemployment kick in? Because now we've done away with the 1 week wait period.
But that's
and-
temporary, right? That's just coronavirus right now. I think
Yeah.
we'll go back to it.
You think that's just a temporary thing, that it's?
I do. That's what I've been told anyways, that they're just doing it for the coronavirus right now. And then,
Yeah, I believe that's just a temporary thing. But I was just going to add, you know, on the equal pay piece, if an employee has a situation right now, just a single employee, for example, that has some unpaid work time, it's possible that a check in the middle of the year could get adjusted, or that the equal pay gets recalibrated from that point in time through the rest of the year. But if there was something that affected all employees, that would necessitate some sort of a negotiation to work out an agreement on what we would do. And like Dan said, that could mean that, you know, usually paycheck number 12 or paycheck number 3 in June is the great balancer, so to speak, you know, where either positive or negative adjustments take place. So that would be a situation probably in, you know, if it's affecting, you know, all employees, that, you know, we would probably look at that or spreading it out or whatever the case may be, because like Nancy's said, you never know what the emergency is. You know, this time it's, you know, coronavirus, and we were having to make decisions not knowing what the next set of circumstances were. And next time, who knows what the event's going to be. So.
Well, right, and I get that we're not Nostradamus here. We can't read the tea leaves and figure out the future, but I think we can take reasonable steps, and I feel like this is one of them. And we kind of batted around, because like with the work share stuff, we kind of delayed when the money came out. We did some different things, and we've had some discussions along those lines too, trying to figure out if the 2 weeks didn't work out exactly. But we're just being really honest with you, we're stuck on this one. We're trying to figure out something to move the ball down the field a little. We're kind of stuck on that second piece. And
I'm sorry, what paragraph specifically are we looking at here? Because I'm not seeing it.
Well, this is ours up there right now.
but it's okay. It's the very last, the long term is what we're
I can put theirs up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to re-look at it on the screen there.
Yeah, just a sec.
The first paragraph, we're largely the same. I think we have some differences where we put A and B in, but other than that, I think it's basically the same. The short term. It's the long term that we're stuck on, Steve.
Yeah, can I see that on there, Kevin? I know I got it in
Give me
my
one sec. I'm getting there.
my file, but I didn't.
So those two green pieces.
The two green pieces? Okay.
You don't have a problem with B, I don't
No,
believe
we don't have a
everybody
problem with
agree
B.
that. You know, the one problem I see with A, irrespective of the 2 weeks issue, is that it only envisions that the board would determine that lost days need to be made up. So we're talking here about lost employee days, not necessarily lost student days, right?
I would think they'd be one and the same, but I would think it would be both, because the children wouldn't be
Kids are
there.
here, we would-
Yeah.
Right, but you know, you can also do a lot of training and so forth with some of your employees
Oh,
on top of when students are there.
uh-oh, somebody's got a dog. Yeah, I mean, in theory, yes, you could, that could be one way to make it up, would be to do some of these trainings and stuff that you got to do anyway. At the end of the year or whenever, you know, would make sense. That could be a way to get us there that last week. So we're really talking about one more week here. That could be a way to do it, where we have the trainings for folks and stuff that you guys normally do anyway, put into that session. That is a very interesting idea.
Thing with that is too, though, the end of the school year is the worst time to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Well, and there's nothing mandating that you would have to do it technically at the end of the year either, right? We would be depending on what we agree upon, right? So we'd have to, that gives us some more to think about. Yeah.
well, also, I guess a couple of things. Every emergency might not involve, even if it involved a school closure, that is, students out. And I don't know if school closure means that, or if school closure means that all the students are out. I guess we have to be careful about defining it, but we will continue to have some employees who will have to work, most likely.
Yeah, we have provisions for that above. We're not saying that wouldn't happen. So it wouldn't necessarily apply to 100%, because obviously the concern is bridging those 2 weeks for some stability. And if somebody's already working those 2 weeks, that's settled right there. That's
Yeah.
So,
You know, the situations I've known over the years have been where this length of closure are things like a fire in a school. And so students kind of all had to they went to split shifts at the other school,
Mhm.
the other middle school, let's say. So now you have a variety of different circumstances that come up. I mean, people are all still working. They're just maybe working in some cases, maybe a few extra hours or a few less hours. But I think that you're aiming for the situation where things are just closed down for a majority of the employees because students aren't there.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to adjust for.
Yeah.
Because the people that are working are obviously getting paid, and that's, that's the issue, right? So we're not trying to like say that if, you did something like the example you gave, you sent somebody to school and they're working over there, that somehow they would not be working because they have this language. That's not what we're saying. We're saying they're not able to work. It's just not, the building collapses or whatever, they can't come in and work. We've got to sit down and figure that out for sure. But in the couple of weeks there where we're figuring that out, they understand they have to make it up, but they're not getting themselves in a situation where they're falling behind on their bills and such.
Yeah.
That is language.
Again, I would just reiterate the fact that if people's first, second paycheck is not going to get impacted by this matter, because we're going to get to the table and figure out what the plan is. And I think the 2 week, somehow the 2 week guarantee, this last situation, we got together, we had the framework of an MOU done within 4 days of the closure. It took a little while to get ink on the paper, but we pretty well had everything hammered out pretty quickly. And so because we had more information about what we were dealing with. And so I think that all of which we're talking about is wrapped up in C, where it says if we're going to, if something's extended more than a week, we're obligated to get to the table and figure out what we're going to do. And I don't think people's paychecks are going to get impacted without an agreement by the association, by you, that wouldn't be, have people have time to figure that out with that last June check that Steve talked about. So yeah, this one, it does feel like we're a little stuck on this one.
Well, and I would say that I understand what you're saying. I guess I would say that C really talks about something that's a legal matter. Like if we have a snowstorm that lasts for 3 weeks, that really wouldn't necessarily be covered in C, right? Or the example that Nancy used of something burning down, right? So I don't think C is the catch-all that you kind of think of it as. It's more of something that's dictated by the law or something that happens because of the law, mandated by law. If we figure it out faster, if we sit down and we figure this out, I mean, nobody's telling you to pay something that you can't recoup your funds on through trainings or work extending, the year or whatever you need to do that way. And nobody's telling you you have to pay that 2 weeks if you already plan to work them in another fashion or do something. This is a safety blanket. So we have something between those things. If we sit down and bargain something out in 4 days, great, we're done, right? It's settled. But if we're all snowed in and we can't get to each other and the power goes out, we can't use Zoom, we've got the safety blanket here to keep us warm for those 2 weeks, right? Until we can get it figured out. Understanding that we would have to make up those days. So that's more of where A comes from for us. Like I said, the intent is not to get something extra. The intent is to have, conformity and have something known for our folks through that process. It's not handcuffs. It doesn't make us have to pay 2 weeks and then figure things out. It doesn't make us have to pay 2 weeks and not to expect to have work extra days or do extra trainings, or that's not the expectation here. It's just to give some security to folks that tend to during the winter get real nervous,
I think we'll need to have, further work with our team on this one. So probably it's about as much as we can do here today. We're going to need to come back to this one. Yeah.
And I think we've made a real good faith effort to try to figure each other out and figure a way around this portion of it. So we'll talk some more in our group about it too.
Yeah, in the meantime, we'll probably be bargaining over this fall.
Oh, don't say that.
No, no, no.
I'm sure Dan's gonna agree to everything in our next session. So with that, did you want to do, did you have another one you want to talk about, or?
We can send you 11.
Okay, haven't seen that. That would be good.
So I'm
All
looking
right.
here at your proposal on 624. And it appears to me that we have pretty much agreement on 1, 2, and 3.
I think that's right, yeah.
It's of course the big controversy here is 3D,
Yes.
and the idea of a maximum of 10 regular part-time employees, and that are less than 20 hours per week. You know, we have talked about that one, but Hobie, we have fewer of those employees percentage-wise than almost any district. We have really done a lot of work in terms of having people have jobs that are 4 hours or more and therefore get some insurance. But we know that there are certain kinds of positions that just in terms of funding, adding insurance may double the cost of that employee. I don't think that we're prepared to give on any kind of guarantee that we won't have less than part-time employees and that we will use them when we have to. You know, many districts hire instructional assistants regularly at 3 3/4 hours for this very reason. This district hasn't done that. We have a unique problem, I think, with food service in that because we have a higher income level, we have less federal subsidy trying to run a food service program. So, you know, food service is one of those jobs that is not a full-day job. So I'll just say that we've talked about that a lot, but that's just to say that that remains an irresolvable matter for us. One, we're not prepared to give any kind of guarantees.
So no number is it, like, there's no number that we could give that would be okay for that, like whether we said 10
No,
or 30 or no.
right. In a way, we're saying, you know, trust the fact that we have seen that having 4-hour employees in instructional assistant positions is worth the extra cost because we get people who are more stable in the job and we get people who, by and large, we have a mandate to have students in school more than 4 hours a day. So the nature of that job fits the 4-hour plus time frame. But the nature of the food service doesn't. And I don't know if there's any other job category where we have substantial numbers of less than 4-hour people. I think we only have 10 of them or 8 of them or something like that.
I think our last count was 13.
Okay.
11, I think 11 were in food service.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the nature of the program that it's not, particularly when we don't do a lot of free and reduced price lunches as some districts do. The nature of the program is it's a program that for many of the workers, except for like head cooks, spans the short period of time around the noon hour and maybe cuts in at some breakfast time too. But generally speaking, we're talking about a short period of time, and we don't need people who are more than 4 hours.
All right.
So let's move on and talk about the section 4. And this was one where we only really have one controversy of a substantive nature. The rest of it is how we write it up. And that is in C, 4C, because you have essentially proposed that the employee could bank days and carry them into the next year.
Right.
At least we think that's, yeah. And we're adverse doing that for a couple of reasons. One is that if that's happening on a regular basis, if it isn't just a real fluke, it's not a good thing to be doing, because it will go on year after year. People build up a lot of compensatory hours. We have to pay those off when they leave, retire, whatever. And we really don't have the ability to have them use all those hours anyway. So, you know, what we think in terms of is that at the end of the fiscal year, we pay out what people haven't used and you start over again. There may be some exceptions to that. You know, very rare kinds of situations. One I see happening is that, you know, you have construction going on, so that may alter the workload for the people who are working around that, custodians and maintenance people, even though they're not specifically involved in the construction, and they put in more overtime, you know, let's say in the spring of the year or in the fall of the year, but we know that that's not going to be a long term. So it's kind of temporary time thing. But by and large, we really want people to get paid for it. And that cost is reflected in the year in which the activity occurred, or to be able to use it in the spring. And that's oftentimes it is, you know, in the second half of the year, it is not always possible to release people that much. So that's why I say that this is the one substantive dispute that I see. The rest of it is just more how we write it up so it's clear to people. And we talked to Kim in payroll about this, and she gave us some suggestions that are reflected here. But so if we look at C, I think is where well, probably have to go back up and look at B or A. So A says what happens if you get paid week by week. So you work 42 hours, you paid 40 hours at straight time, and you're paid 2 hours at time and a half. Then when you get to compensatory time off, now you have a situation where it's a mutual agreement of the supervisor and employee that they're going to be some banking of that time. The law also allows school districts to mandate compensatory time off, even though the employee wouldn't agree. I don't know if that happens very often because we're not maybe in that budgetary situation, but so there, the employee and the supervisor generally agree that we're going to save that time, and instead of paying it out, you'll get 1.5 hours for every hour of time that you put in over 40 hours in that week. So if you have to do the 42 hours, you went 2 hours over, 1.5 times that, 3 hours. So you got a bank of 3 hours. So we just simplified that language a little bit, I think. And then if you go down to C, go down there. Now this is about how much you can accrue. And we're really keeping current concept here. You can accrue 40 hours of work that you work beyond 40 hours each week. And that, you know, translates into 60 straight time hours. We are calling those compensatory hours. And then you can use that for time off that's not covered by other paid leaves and so forth. But at the end of each school year, the employee will be reimbursed for any accrued and unused compensatory time.
So the
The
other
dis-
thing we thought we would do, and we kind of ran out of time to do it, is to give some examples
Mhm.
in this section so that we had some, so people could see both how the compensatory works and then the compensatory time accrual works in terms of getting paid out on that. So in June. So I know we kind of changed the language up there, but I think it makes it more consistent of how that function works.
So are you saying that with the way it's written here, people can have up to 60 compensatory hours in their bank, but whatever they don't use in June, they'll be cashed out and they won't be able to carry that over to the following year?
Yeah, that's current practice, and I don't know if you remember, if you gave us an explanation as to why you wanted a rollover. So I mean, we're open to hearing the why, but probably not necessarily something we're interested in. But we couldn't remember why that was sought after.
Okay, so there was a couple things. One, we thought it was a win-win situation for simple reason that, if somebody gets these hours and they tell you by whatever date that, hey, I want to roll this into the next school year, they got to use it within the next school year or it gets cashed out the following year, right? That was the idea, so that we would have some flexibility where you're not just paying a bill at the end of every month. Maybe they use a few days here and there. So they'd have been working anyway, so it saves you some potential money that way, but it also allows them to utilize, like the comment was made in the springtime, sometimes, it's hard to let people off. Well, with mutual agreement, that takes care of that piece of it, so you're not getting overly burdened, but it also would allow them to have some time off. Maybe in the summer, they work less hours, for instance. They'd be able to take some of those hours then, and that way it would be kind of a win-win. The idea was it would roll into the next year and then be cashed out if it was not taken within that next year. So they could essentially extend it, a little bit longer. And I think you had some comments on, not related to this, but on a TA that we made about what rate they get paid at and stuff like that. And extending it beyond from year to year beyond that would create those headaches too. I can see that. But we were talking about just giving flexibility to employees and having them being able to push it to the next year. I don't think we were talking about pushing it out year after year. Like, I earned something this year and then 3 years later, it's still in my comp bank. I don't think that was the idea from our side. That's where the rollover came from, was for that. Whatever you don't use this year, you would cash next year at the rate of pay. And you would hopefully sometime during the following school year have time to where mutually agreed upon to take that time so that it would be paid out at that rate and not having just to pay a big bill in June. So that's our logic on that. Whether it's something you're interested or not, I don't know, but that was the idea behind it.
One possible sort of accommodation for both interests would be to allow a certain amount to carry over, but not this whole amount of 60 compensatory hours. I mean, 60 compensatory hours, when you think about it, I mean, that's a heck of a lot of days in the next year that the person's going to be gone, in addition to sick leave days, personal leave days, vacation days, and all that. So limiting the carryover so that, somebody would have a little bit, maybe in July, August, maybe their particular job makes it easier for them to take that time than it was in May and June or whatever.
Right. We wouldn't be opposed to that. That makes sense to us.
Okay. Well, we do have this one big issue about part-time, less than 4 hours. And I guess that at the moment, I'm not seeing any resolution to that. That doesn't mean we can't go ahead and finish up on this section on comp time.
Right.
And so my suggestion would be that maybe we try to write that up and send it over to you to look at before the next meeting. You can look at it with your team. We can talk about it and try to, get a TA. Normally, I don't really like the TA parts of articles, but these are so distinctly different parts of this article. We also wanted to ask you about the fact that the last proposal we got from you on 624 didn't have D, E, and F on it, and I assume that was just unintentional.
Yeah, I don't think that we,
That's current language.
yeah, I think it just must have gotten deleted somehow. It's current language, it stays current language. If we were deleting it, we would have struck it through. And
Okay. Well, why don't we work between now and the next meeting on this compensatory time portion?
Okay.
And
We'll get
hopefully
some examples in there, and we'll talk to Kim about the impacts of any sort of rollover. I want to get, the people that deal with the kind of the ramifications of those decisions. I want to get their input on it before we agree to something like that. And we'll get some examples in there too, so that so everybody's clear.
Yeah, and like I said, Dan, we're amenable to having a partial. The idea was not to. Idea was that we thought there might be a mutual kind of win-win situation here. Person taking that compensatory time, the next year could be after July 1st, right? So you could be giving them at a cheaper rate for that day that they're gone, So and you're not paying, you're paying it from hours they've already earned too. So there could be some savings there for you. It's not going to be enough to, buy a yacht or anything, but I'll tell you, it's going to be something. So, it's something you could look at. That's our idea. And just giving more flexibility to those people. So we thought it might be a win-win, but if it's not, just let us know. We'll figure it. I feel like we're going to figure this piece out with number 6. I'm less hopeful with the upper part, So, but we'll keep working on it.
Okay.
All right.
So we know what we're going to do between now and the next meeting on this part. So
On that one, we do, yes.
Yep.
We go
Okay.
to 12. We're going to send that up to the back. All right, it's on its way. All right. So 12, again, the color scheme is yellow is from the past proposal. Blue is agreed upon, and green is current changes that we're talking about. So with 3, you can see we've accepted your section below superintendent. I think we're still stuck on the 2 internals for external hire. We had some discussions on when you proposed on that. We're stuck on that a little bit. We're still trying to figure out a way to work around something there that might be beneficial for both of us. But kind of like number 3 and the last one, I feel like we're a little bit stuck on this one. Something with number 3, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, going down the page to 5D, we understood with Dan's example that they want to use the people that are in the building there. That's the easiest thing to do. So we changed our proposal. Yellow is what we had before, but we did change it to building designated representative of the union. We understood that made sense to us to utilize the people first that are that are right there, and not bringing somebody in from the outside, you know, when we have somebody right there in the building. That made sense to us. So we proposed that back to you, thinking that that might take care of that, but you'll have to let us know on that piece. And then I could go all the way down to 8. So you beat us in the submission on this one, so we're gonna go ahead and take your language on the extension. If you decide to extend, it's your choice to extend them or not. They'll have the 45 days, and then you will, if you want to extend them, you will. If you don't, then they would go back to their other job. So we can be done with that piece if you're fine with your language.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
That's helpful. All right.
Not to put Kevin on the spot, but Kevin, you have any thoughts on that D transfer language with their building designated rep of the union?
No.
Yeah, I'm Nancy. I'm not sure what your thoughts are. I don't really have any issues with that
No.
because there's, I mean, there's. Yeah, I think you guys get what we're targeting there. I just don't want things elevating up to where, you know, it's Vance and I sitting in a meeting about a transfer at a building. I just want to keep it at kind of that same level. So that's all.
Should be trying to do it at the lower level anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's all right.
I would look at this as being the rep of the employee who has raised the issue. So sometimes you have like Dana making a transfer of people in a program because maybe the program has moved to another building. And it could be a classroom at the middle school level that is, for autistic students or severely physically handicapped or something. And that almost automatically leads to a decision to reassign and transfer the employee to that. In that case, I think it's the decision maker who holds that meeting, the supervisor. And I don't know whether Dana is considered her supervisor. In that case, I think it's the building rep of the person who is contesting the decision or just unhappy with the decision.
I think we had some really good discussions about what you're talking about as far as the person, like, you know, the special ed that worked for the students, built that trust, and they move with them, and having a quick meeting with those folks. And I would say with the rep as well, or the designated representative of the union, I would say I don't see a downside. They're in, you know, you grab it happens at the shop over here, you grab Vance, you sit down with him, or if it happens in Michelle's building, you grab. I see that as everybody being on the same page and understanding that this situation is happening because of these circumstances, and everybody can ask the questions there, and then we can be done with it at the lower level, is what I'm thinking of when I see this. Because if we wait till somebody complains, now me and Dan and Vance are sitting down talking about it again, you know, and there's a grievance or something, and it just seems easier if we try to keep it relegated to going first to the rep being there, so they can say, hey, this is what's going on. You're not doing anything wrong. You're actually good at your job. You're moving because we need you with this particular student.
Yeah.
You know, I see that as a positive thing that should go quickly, I would think. I guess if there's some real consternation about it, then me and Dan and Vance might have to get involved. But it just feels like it's smoother here. And people, you know, Vance is used to have a discussion with Dan or whoever it might be, or Kevin or Steve, whoever it might be. But the average person, you know, they go into that room, they don't know what they should say or not say. It's like, if you have that third person there, they can just say, hey, this is what's going on. They're following the contract. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, then it relax a little, then they can ask more of the questions about, well, how will this affect this? Or will I still be able to do that? You know, that's how I see this process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
Well, I think we're fine saying the building designated representatives. That seems to be the language we're looking at. Yeah. Okay.
Start at the lowest level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So I think
So
we're in a similar position where we have one section, but the rest is kind of kind of agreed to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that is the case, but that doesn't mean we haven't done a lot of good work on this. And
True.
it also means that, as we move along, it's going to be simpler because it's kind of like we've got everything on 12 done except this one issue. And then we
Yeah.
can keep that going.
Right.
All right. So where does that leave us with the agenda for today? We got 7 to talk about.
Who's gonna make a proposal to you guys? I'm just kind of putting it out loud here. I talked to my folks about it a little bit. And not to exclude anybody, but would this be something that maybe Nancy and I should sidebar on and try to figure out where we can agree and then bring that, whatever we agree to, back to our parties to see if it's something agreeable to the two sides? The reason why I say that is because it is a lot. It takes up a lot of time. And I just thought it might save more of our time together for things that are not quite as complicated, but just a thought process.
That sounds okay to me because I think my team is relying upon me and I can check back with them if there's any, practice kind of practical issues. So I don't know. That would mean we would work on it between now and the next meeting and try to then have something to bring in that we think that we can both agree on, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking that you and I could figure out some times that would work where we can have these discussions and try to get through this stuff. And it's where you and I are mutually unhappy, so we probably have a good deal. And then we could go to our sides and talk to them and make sure that if they're okay with it, we could bring it back to the general session to TA or whatnot.
Okay.
I definitely like that idea. Kevin was pretty, yeah, that is a self-serving answer right there. Kevin was getting pretty close to getting what we were describing on paper done, but we kept interrupting him. And so, if we would have just shut up for a few minutes, he might have been able to get something over to you. But so in other words, maybe if Kevin got those captured and then sent them to,
Yeah, that would be a good approach.
I'll get that, either Kevin or myself will get that to Nancy and Hobie. And yeah, we'll let you get it across the finish line.
All right. Yeah, we can schedule some time between now and the next meeting to work on that. So
Yeah, I just got to thinking that it just takes so much time, and it's putting our people to sleep over here a little bit. So I figured it's probably a similar effect over there.
yawning, right?
Not
Okay.
because the law like you and me, Nancy. All right, cool. Then we're gonna get, where are we at? That's a great question, because I think we've countered what you've countered to us today.
Well, maybe, I don't know what Nancy, what kind of time you have to maybe update that tracking sheet, get that
Right.
updated, then I can get that over to Hobie and Vance, kind of make sure we're calibrated there. I know that, so I think what we've held out on a lot of the financial related ones. So I think that we will try to come back with, we haven't addressed holidays or vacation leaves and those things. So I think we will try to tackle those before our next session, or at least get some conversations, because we haven't talked about those since the first time. So
Well, there's stuff in there that's, there is like a portion that might be financial, but then there's other pieces that are not.
right,
So kind of like we're doing with 12 and 11, maybe work through the parts where we can,
yeah,
and get some of that stuff closer so that we are just talking about the bottom line on some of the
Right.
stuff, financials and stuff.
Yeah, one of the things that, I think helps in that discussion is to quantify the cost, because, we've got so many floating pieces. We've got the amount of insurance contribution. We've got the number of holidays and who gets them. We've got vacations, and, you propose to add a whole group of employees who don't have currently a vacation provision, and then also to increase those for the 12-month ones. We've got the proposal to add personal leave. We can come back on sick leave. I think we haven't dealt with that, but that's largely that whole issue about the sick leave bank. So that's the remaining issue there. And then, you know, I think there's little pieces that might have some financial impact. But for the most part is those plus salary. And I think that we almost have to do this in keeping afloat all of these, because ultimately, let's say that the addition of personal leave is going to be pretty expensive. If you're going to add days for every member of the bargaining unit. Well, that has an impact on what we'll be proposing on salaries probably, or some other benefit. So I think quantifying the costs of each of those may be a helpful step at this point. You know, it's probably work we have to do. And then, you know, we could look at it and we could say, well, we might be open to this, but of course, you know, that cost has to come out in the big picture. Sort of narrow down the list of what we might be open to. But Steve was sharing some information with our team about how the decisions at the state level are getting pushed back further for a variety of reasons. You probably heard the same stuff. And yet, I mean, ideally, we'd like to be able to settle this contract. We've got sessions scheduled through late August. I think that would be the outside. I mean, I would hope that I think we're on track to do that, except for the uncertainty about finances.
Right.
So there's a couple of approaches when you're in that kind of a mode. One of them is that you pin down a first year agreement and then you have reopeners for second, third. That may be an approach that has some merit because, you know, the district has some reserves. So this year, it may be what's going to happen in 21, 23, which I think a lot of people are more fearful about that in terms of state funding.
Right.
The state has some rainy day funds. Maybe they'll get some federal funds, kind of shore up the budget for this year. But what happens then? So maybe reopeners is a way to get this thing settled for the time being.
Yeah, and we can have that discussion, absolutely. I still think that we can talk about, like, for instance, we have like the zipper clause, and I think you know the problem with that article.
Yeah, we can talk about some of those pieces.
Yeah, there's pieces like, and there's stuff like, for some reason we have language that maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but it's trying to say that we don't bargain for 150 days, you bargain for 90 on a success agreement. That I believe is illegal, but there's things like that I've made changes in there that are not financial type stuff. It's more like stuff that we need to get, kind of like the piece from Article 5 where we were talking about getting the fair share because that became illegal, struck out of there. And there's some stuff like that that's close to being housekeeping, really. Not 100% housekeeping, that's why I didn't put it under there. That there's things like that we can get done in the time we have here between now and August. That would move us down the field towards that, trying to wrap everything by the end of August. I mean, I can tell you the folks here want to know their vacations too, right? Because they may not get one in the fall after the corona comes back, right? So hopefully it doesn't, you know, but there's a lot of things going on, and we're eager to get things resolved too. But there's a lot of stuff that I feel like we can be working on that we're kind of setting aside. Like, for instance, leaves. I would really like to take a stab at doing something with that, with the Uniform Act, you know, with the folks that we're trying to get covered for the different laws under the state, you know, those folks, you know, come out of the military, those kind of people we want to have, you know, join our ranks. But since it's tied up with the whole financials, it's like, I feel like we can work on that piece and still be able to.
Yeah, I think 22 and 27, 22 is funding and 27 is term of the agreement. Maybe we can both look at those for next time.
Okay.
And I'm prepared to discuss those. So that would be part of the agenda for next time. And then, you know, you and I work on 7, bring something back that hopefully will settle that one up. We've given you a proposal on insurance, and I don't know if there's other parts of that article, but maybe we look and see if there are any other parts of that article but they're all cost related, I think there.
Yeah, there.
So we'll look at holidays and vacations and come back with a response. You've given us a proposal on that. We could have said status quo on that. So that would probably be a full agenda. We'll come back on the emergency closure thing with the discussion that we've had here today about your interest in having people having some sort of security about pay for a 2-week period, not a 1 week period.
Yeah, not just the 1 week. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay.
And did you, I'm sorry, maybe Dan brought this up. Did you say that you guys were sending over the tracker, kind of where we're at on these different things right now?
I will do that in the next day.
Perfect. That's fine. Okay. Well, then I think we're adjourned until next time, right?
Yep. So the 14th, same bat time, same bat channel.
Although you got the agenda this time.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you.
See you guys.